This video will be covering the basics of how to navigate the UI and where to find your tools while you're working in Storyboard Pro 7.
Tool. So as soon as you start up Storyboard Pro, you're going to see this screen here. If you had any recent projects, you would be able to click here in order to open them, or you can click Open Project to browse to an existing project location. So I'm going to start from scratch. So we're going to just call this basic. You have a lot of templates for different types that you might want to use. I'm going to go with the default of 1080p, 24 frames per second, and then I'll go ahead and create project. And this is what the default project looks like once you first get started. You might not have some things like, for example, you might not have this timeline, and your panel might be over here. Your panel tab might be over here, but that's just because I messed around with it and it saved those settings. But generally, this is what you should be looking at when you first start up the program. So first of all, let me talk about workspaces. So workspace is just a way to quickly go to a different configuration of the UI where it'll be focusing and exposing elements based on different types of work. For example, like a PDF review, pitch mode, which is probably like a PowerPoint presentation, etc. So I'll be staying in the main workspace, which is drawing. Another thing you can do is you can enable and disable what you see in the UI. For example, I can hide the tools. So the tools went away. So let me bring them back. Now, let's say you've been adventurous and you were hiding and showing and moving and doing a bunch of things, but now you can't find something that you need. So what you do is you come back to this menu, and there's this ability to go to restore default workspace, which will get you back to the initial state of the application. So now let's talk about kind of like the main areas of where things are. So as I click around here, you can see that these areas are outlined by a red silhouette. Sorry, I clicked out here in the timeline and then it kind of changed everything a little bit. So I'm going to click back here so the timeline is on a panel and everything kind of looks the same. So as I'm clicking around here, you see that it has this red highlight, and the reason why it has this red highlight is to let you know that that this area currently has focus. So if you use any keyboard shortcuts, they're going to be executed in this context. So if I were to try to if I wanted to delete a drawing or something in here and I were to hit the backspace, it would actually affect whatever I currently had selected in here. So it's good to be aware of what you have selected. Over here are your tools. So the selection tool, contour tool, in order to be able to shape lines and tweak them. The brush, pencil, they're very similar with small differences I'll get into later. So general tools that if you've ever used any other drawing or painting software, you should be roughly familiar with what they do. So now let's look over here. Let's start here and look at this stage view. Well, one important thing to note is that these buttons inside of these views are called tabs, and you can put them anywhere. You could even create a new view with them. So for example, I can come here, like if you don't have your timeline, let's say, I remove mine, I can just come here, click, and add the timeline. So that's how I enable these different UI elements. Another important thing is, they could be anywhere, but if a particular tab is already being displayed, I cannot add it to this tab. So let's say, for example, I have thumbnails and I try to add it here as well. It's just not going to do it. But if thumbnails was not currently visible in the UI generally, and then I add it here, then it'll work. So let me put my thumbnails back here at the bottom. Okay, another thing is you can resize these views just by clicking and dragging in these bar areas. You can create new views. For example, if I click panel and I click and hold, and then I come out here towards the top. So here in the bottom it wasn't working. If I were to let go, I would get a floating panel like this. But now, I mean, technically it's a floating area. I could even add tabs here, move this to a second monitor if I wanted. But I'm going to bring it back, put it back. Actually, I'm going to create a new embedded area that's not floating. So when I click here, now you see I have my panel up here and I have the other tabs down here. So it's a very flexible UI system. So I'm going to put the panel tab back with the other tabs. I'm going to click and hold and hover over the existing tabs. And so now it's back. It resized itself a little funny, but no big deal. The next thing about how you see your UI, let's say you wanted to work on your drawing and you want to focus on you want to get as maximum real estate as you want. Well, first of all, you can float your panels and put them in another monitor. But another thing you can do is you can just click that button to make that real estate, reclaim that real estate, and then if you click this button again, it'll work again. So that's generally how to kind of organize and move your set up your UI. So now we've clicked on these tabs, but we really haven't talked about them at all. So let's start talking about the stage view. So the stage view is where you're going to be doing your drawings, and it's related to a panel. So if you have many panels, the stage view is going to display the content of the currently selected panel. This is where you draw. This is where you can add layers. Um, you can add vector layers, bitmap layers, and I'll get into that distinction shortly. So that's the stage view. The other thing you can do is you can hide this in case you want to get a little bit more real estate. You can also change what information is displayed and how it's displayed. So for example, I can toggle this. Now I no longer see my current time and which scene and panel I'm in. I can also hide the title safe, the action safe, and let's say for example if I were drawing and I just wanted to kind of draw things outside. For some reason, like maybe just the way I'm drawing, I want to draw a whole figure, but part of it is in the frame, part of it isn't. And then I could turn the mask on to see exactly what is in the frame. So I'm going to go ahead and click the layer I just drew in, do Command A or Control A if you're on Windows, and hit backspace to delete everything in that layer. So with stage view, I'm managing my layers and I'm seeing the contents of the panel. The storyboard panel tab here, the storyboard tab is just telling you the general information. You could actually even copy the script over here. It's saying right now we're at 1 second, 24 frames, one scene, one panel. Tools properties is like any other tool properties you're probably familiar with. It changes context based on, well, it changes what it displays based on the tool that you have selected. So as you select different tools, different options emerge. Something else that lives in the properties is your color palette. I had mine hidden, but if you click here, you should probably see yours displayed by default. You can hide it and show it, and that's always going to be in the tools properties tab. If we go to library, this is an important one. Let's say you took your time, you worked out the drawing of some character, prop, or background, and then you did it all in the layer. You would then click and drag in order to add it to your library. Now it'll be available to use in any other panel or project. So, and there's also some templates. For example, here's an example of an explosion. So I can just bring it in from the library, drag it here, and then I see that it added a completely new layer, so it's not going to affect any existing work in the panel. And you may have noticed when I select off of it, it kind of dims or loses opacity. That's just because I have this Lightbox option on. And what that does is it visually prioritizes the layer that you're currently working on. Otherwise, they're all going to be, however you have them set up. So if I turn the Lightbox on, it visually prioritizes the current layer I'm doing, which can be helpful when while you're drawing. So I'm going to right click and delete this